Hospital tales. True scary stories. Our scary and horror stories are designed to send chills down your spine. Enjoy the spine-tingling stories thrill. Story number 1. The Lost Ward. Nurse Abigail had always been curious about the old wing of St. Clementine's Hospital. It had been sealed off for decades, the windows were covered in dust, and no one ever seemed to go in or out. Rumor had it that it was haunted, and some even spoke of a lost ward that housed patients with strange ailments. One evening, during her night shift, her curiosity got the better of her. She decided to explore the old wing. The corridors were dimly lit, and a chilly wind seemed to permeate the place despite all windows being shut. That's when she stumbled upon a door with a rusty nameplate that read, Ward 13. She cautiously opened the door and was greeted with an eerie sight. The ward looked as if it was still in use. Beds with white sheets, instruments on trays, and charts hung at the foot of the beds. But what was most alarming were the patients. They sat still on their beds, staring blankly, all of them looking just as they would have decades ago. As she turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind her. Panicking, she tried to open it but it wouldn't budge. The patients began to mutter and whisper amongst themselves, slowly rising from their beds. She finally managed to pry the door open and sprinted out, hearing the echoes of their whispers chasing after her. The next day, she asked her colleagues about Ward 13, but none seemed to know of its existence. She tried showing them the wing, but the door she had entered the previous night was nowhere to be found. Story number 2. The Phantom Surgeon. Dr. Marshall had been a renowned surgeon at Mercy General, but after a series of unsuccessful surgeries that led to the tragic deaths of several patients, he was asked to resign. Heartbroken, he took his own life in one of the operating rooms. Years later, patients who underwent surgery claimed they felt a cold hand guiding theirs during the procedure, whispering surgical instructions. Nurses reported instruments moving on their own and surgical lights flickering during operations. One evening, a surgeon was performing a complicated heart surgery when he felt a chilling presence. Looking up at the reflection in the stainless steel equipment, he saw Dr. Marshall standing beside him, guiding his hands. Startled, he stepped back, and the ghostly surgeon completed the procedure with precision. From that day on, any surgery that took place in that particular room was mysteriously flawless, but the price was a chilling encounter with the Phantom Surgeon. Story number 3. The Crying Infant. The maternity ward at the Hillview Hospital had always been a place of joy, filled with the cries of newborns and happy parents. However, room 309 was different. No matter how bright the sun was outside, this room was always cold and dark. Legend had it that decades ago, a woman named Lila was admitted to give birth. Tragically, her child was stillborn. Devastated, Lila would sit in room 309, singing lullabies to her child. One night, a pregnant woman named Clara was admitted to room 309. She was unaware of its history. In the dead of night, she was awakened by the soft lullaby, and she saw a figure of a woman, singing and cradling an invisible baby. Terrified, Clara pressed the call button, and the nurses rushed in. The apparition vanished, but Clara insisted on being moved. From that night, any mother-to-be who stayed in room 309 reported hearing the lullaby, a haunting reminder of the baby that never cried. Story number 4. The Curious Case of Ward E. For many years, newbie nurses at Ravenwood Hospital were initiated with tales of Ward E. It wasn't listed on any of the maps and didn't have a designated floor. But, late at night, especially during storms, calls would come from Ward E, requesting assistance. One stormy night, Nurse Alara decided to trace the call. She followed the voice directions and found herself at an old wooden door labeled Ward E. Inside, patients from different eras sat, waiting. They all looked up and smiled. "You answered." As the door closed behind her, she realized that no one left Ward E. Story number 5. The Melancholy Musician. In Ashcroft Hospital's abandoned wing, night guards reported hearing haunting melodies of a piano. Intrigued, Rowan, a psychologist with an interest in the paranormal, decided to investigate. He discovered an old, dusty piano in a room. The keys moved on their own, playing a sad tune. Nearby, he found journals of a patient, a pianist who lost his hands in an accident and was driven mad with grief. They say his spirit still plays the tunes he once loved. Story number 6. The frozen timepiece. In room 415 of Thornhill Hospital, there was a peculiar clock that had stopped working at 3:07 a.m. Regardless of attempts to fix or replace it, every clock placed there stopped at that exact time. Patients who stayed in that room reported waking up at 3:07 a.m., feeling a cold hand gripping their wrist, only to find the room temperature normal and no one there. A check into hospital archives revealed a surgeon who died during a late-night operation that began at 3:07 a.m., leaving behind a patient who never woke up. Story number 7. The Radiant Child. Claremont Pediatric Hospital was always filled with the laughter and chatter of children, except in room 109. Children admitted there became quiet and often spoke of a glowing boy who would visit them at night. He'd tell them stories of a place beyond the stars and promised to take them there when they were ready. While no harm ever came to the children, they'd always wake up with a small, star-shaped mark on their palms. Old hospital records spoke of a young boy who passed away in that room after frequently speaking about a world beyond the stars, where children were forever happy. Story number 8. The Haunting in the X-ray Room. The radiology department of Elmbridge Hospital had state-of-the-art equipment. Yet, technicians always felt unease when they worked with the old X-ray machine in room 8. Whenever films were developed, along with the patient's bones, a shadowy figure would sometimes appear beside them. As time went on, the figure became clearer, and soon it was identifiable as a doctor from the 1920s. Some say it's Drive Lyle, a radiologist who disappeared without a trace, still trying to finish his work. Story number 9. The Phantom Call for Bed 7. Nurse Martha was used to the hectic environment of Green Hollow Hospital's emergency ward. But what she wasn't used to was the recurring phantom call for Bed 7. Every so often, the intercom would crackle to life with a distressed voice calling for assistance at Bed 7. But the ward only had 6 beds. One evening, driven by curiosity and a bit of fear, Martha followed the voice's direction to an old, bricked-up doorway. An old blueprint of the hospital revealed there used to be a Bed 7, sealed after a patient mysteriously vanished from it. Story number 10. The Corridor of Lost Souls. Briarcliff's long corridor connecting the old and new wings was avoided by most staff during the night. Patients who were transported through the corridor often spoke of seeing people from different time periods, wandering, looking lost, and reaching out. One patient even claimed she saw her grandmother, who had been treated at the hospital 50 years prior. The corridor became known as the Passageway of Echoes, a bridge between the hospital's past and present. Story number 11. The Attic's Restless Shadows. The attic of Stonebridge Hospital was converted into storage, filled with discarded equipment and old records. But staff rarely ventured there after sunset. Those who did spoke of restless shadows moving, whispers of patients long gone, and the feeling of being watched. They say it's the souls of patients who passed away in the hospital, still waiting for their discharge papers. Story number 12. The Morgue's Midnight Guest. The morgue at Hardwell Hospital was a place of quiet reverence, but there was one drawer that occasionally made noises, even when empty. Night security would often hear knocking from inside, and when opened, they would find an old photograph of a woman, dated 1892. No one knew who she was or why her spirit seemed trapped in the morgue, but the photograph would always reappear, regardless of how many times it was removed. Story number 13. The Eternal Wait in the Old Lobby. Rosemont Hospital's old lobby had long been replaced by a modern waiting area, but the old wing remained standing, though rarely used. Late at night, an elderly man could sometimes be seen, waiting with an old leather suitcase. He'd smile and nod, mentioning he's waiting for his wife to be discharged. Records later revealed a couple in the 1950s where the wife died during a surgery, and the grief-stricken husband passed away in the waiting area, still holding on to hope. His spirit lingers, forever waiting for their reunion. Story number 14. The Distress Signal from ICU 6. At Bayside Hospital, there was an ICU room that always showed vitals on the monitor, even when no patient was present. The heart rate and respiratory patterns would display signs of distress, only to normalize moments later. On some nights, a faint silhouette would be seen pressing against the room's glass window. Rumors said it was the spirit of a patient who passed away feeling trapped and desperately trying to communicate. Story number 15. The Tale of the Two-Faced Nurse. At Moonlight General, a spectral figure of a nurse was often spotted roaming the halls at night. From the front, she appeared beautiful and caring, with her white uniform immaculately clean. However, when she turned, her backside revealed burned scars, and her uniform was charred. Many believe she was a victim of a hospital fire in the 1930s, forever trapped between her duty and her tragic end. Story number 16. The Locked Room of Sorrows. Evergreen Mental Health Facility had a room, 222, that was always locked. Old staff whispered about a patient, Clara, who was kept there. She was a prolific artist, drawing her emotions and dreams on the room's walls. But as her mental health deteriorated, her drawings became darker, filled with monstrous creatures and haunting eyes. One day, Clara disappeared, but her presence never left. Anyone entering room 222 felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow, and the walls seemed to shift, with the creatures in the drawings appearing to move just at the edge of one's vision. Story number 17. The Vanishing Act in the Mirror. Bellevue Hospital had a unique feature, a vintage mirror in its main hallway, a relic from its early days. Patients and staff reported seeing reflections of people from different eras when they glanced at it. Some even claimed they had brief conversations with these reflections, discussing ailments and treatments from decades past. However, when they'd turn around, the hallway would be empty, with only the echo of fading voices. Story number 18. The Radios That Tuned to the Past. Gravestone Hospital was equipped with modern facilities, but for some reason, the radios in patient rooms often glitched. They would tune into broadcasts from decades ago, playing old music or news from World War II. Some patients claimed to see spectral dances or wartime scenes play out in front of them. Staff later discovered the hospital was built on the grounds of an old radio station, and it seemed the echoes of the past were still broadcasting. Story number 19. The Playground of Spirits. Adjacent to Haven Children's Hospital was a playground, filled with swings, slides, and seesaws. At night, the swings would sometimes move on their own, and the faint laughter of children could be heard. On closer look, translucent figures of children would be seen playing, representing those who once stayed in the hospital but never got the chance to play outside again. Story number 20. The Persistent Page for Dr. Fields. At Sunrise Hospital, the PA system would occasionally page, "Drive Fields to Oncology, a message from a time long gone." Dr. Fields was an oncologist who had passed away in the hospital many years prior, renowned for his dedication to his patients. Some staff members and patients reported seeing a comforting figure by the bedsides of terminally ill patients, believed to be Drive Fields continuing his rounds. The end.